change seats.
Okay, well, I'm gonna apologize first because.
Do something music.
Oh, hi. Ah, hi.
Okay, let's start.
Okay, well, first I'll apologize because I made this very quickly, so it's not great, but my name's Stuart, Stuart Meadows, and I've lived in Japan for 5 years. I work at Daito Junior High School. You're junior high school? Oh, great. So you know the boys are cheeky, very naughty, Yansha students. But I'm from Scotland, so you probably know about the UK, but quickly I'll explain. It's a bit difficult. So there are 4 countries in the United Kingdom: England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. So that's the United Kingdom. It's 4 different countries. But this island, just that one island, is called Britain. And that one island is called Ireland. So actually, Ireland isn't a country, it's 2 countries: Northern Ireland and South Ireland, or Republic of Ireland. Anyway, forget that. You can forget that, it's not important. Actually, you can see the flag of the UK is Scotland's flag, England's flag, and Northern Ireland's flag together, but not Wales.
Yeah, where's the big dragon?
Yeah, we. Sorry.
Where's Wales?
Yeah, Wales should be there, but nobody cares about Wales. So, of course, I'm from Scotland, so I was born in Stirling, in the centre of Scotland. And then I moved to the south of Scotland, but actually, Scotland is the same size as Hokkaido, so the area and population, and in this central area here, it's very small, but 75% of Scotland's people live in that small area. It has 3 big towns: Glasgow, Edinburgh, and Stirling are the 3 of the big towns in Scotland in that small area. Okay, Scotland's culture now is thanks to its history. So first I want to go some years back, 70,000 BC, so a long time ago. But people lived around the land. It wasn't the UK then, but people lived on the land there. And we know because we found about 10 axes, so old axe for hitting ice, to hit ice with. So we found about 10 axes in Scotland from about 70,000 years BC. And then people disappeared because the Ice Age came, so it got very cold. And huge rivers of ice, so big glaciers, big rivers of ice were going through, especially Scotland. So later we can see Scotland's land is made by these glaciers, this ice.
Sorry, Stuart.
Yeah.
The axes.
Yeah.
What were they made of?
I don't know, but it wasn't iron, it was flint,
Okay.
or some sort of stone,
Okay.
because it was long before
Yeah.
Iron Age and Bronze Age, so. Yep, so the ice came, and we couldn't live in Scotland until about 60,000 years later, so 9,500 BC, the ice disappeared. And then people started to appear around the land again. At this stage, it was just small villages, so clans, like groups of people around the country. There was no countries, there were no kings, just, kind of like the Asakura clan or different clans around Japan. It's the same kind of thing, same system. So this is evidence of the oldest buildings in Northern Europe, actually. The oldest standing buildings in Northern Europe from about 3,500 BC. We can still see them now. And a few years later, in the Bronze Age, people could make metal and iron, and of course fighting became more common because of weapons and so on. So there were many of these buildings appearing. This is called this is a Scottish word. It's called broch. Broch. B-R-O-C-H. So it's just a round building, and we can find many of those buildings. It's like inside people would make weapons, and it's like a small castle. It's like a castle. So now we can see some ruins from these brochs. Some ruins are very overgrown and they've disappeared. Some are semi-ruined, and some are still complete now. And even nowadays, actually, some of them have been changed into houses or small buildings. So those were built during the Iron Age, which was about 1,000 years before Christ, 1,000 years BC, I think. And actually, there's evidence of about 10,000 of these buildings in Scotland. So there were a lot of buildings were made. Sorry, you missed that. They looked like this. So about 10,000 of these were in Scotland at that time. So historians, people who study history, think that there was a lot of fighting within Scotland between different areas, different families. Anyway. Later, the Romans came. So, in 43 AD, the Romans invaded the south of this land, and they called it Britannia, which later becomes Britain. So this was the Roman Empire. And these were people living in Scotland at that time. So the Romans tried, but they couldn't win the battle. So many times the Romans tried to kill the Scottish people. So in 122, the year 122, the Romans built a wall from coast to coast in Scotland. And this was the first time that we have a border between the south and the north. And later that became the border for England and Scotland later. So that's the very first time we see some difference between the two areas. It's called Hadrian's Wall, because the Roman in charge of building it was Hadrian. So
Roman came from the bottom or south?
yeah, they came up through from Italy and from the Mediterranean, came up through Europe and then through France towards England.
So native people are living in Scotland?
Well, the native people lived around all the land, but at this time it wasn't a country, it was just land. So there were no rules, no kings or anything. So the Romans could defeat the south easily, but they couldn't defeat the Scots. And it's probably because the land is so mountainous, there are so many mountains, so it was difficult for them to attack Scottish people at that time. Actually, after they built this wall, they called that country in the north, they called it Caledonia. Caledonia in Latin means hard feet. So they think the people in the north, it's difficult to move them. So they stay in Scotland. They can't move them out of Scotland. And they also called the people in Scotland Picti, which means painted face. So people think that Scottish warriors would paint their face before they battle. Anyway, later, a few years later, Romans built a new wall and moved north. They moved further north. But shortly later, Scottish defeated the Romans. And the Romans went back to Europe. Change. So now, when the Romans left Europe, there was a new country. It was England. So at the time it was called Britannia, but in the south, I'm so sorry. So in the south, this was England, and this still had no name, just Caledonia. It wasn't a country yet. And in Ireland, they'd found religion, Christianity, from the Romans. So St. Patrick brought Christianity to Ireland. There were many different clans, many different families. So there were some clans living in Scotland from England, and there was some other clans who had come from Ireland, and the Pict families. So people came from Ireland too. During the next hundreds of years, there were many battles between families in Scotland. So there were many small battles between different people. And then the Vikings came. The Vikings came by boat from the Norse areas like Sweden and Norway and so on. And they destroyed life on all of those small islands. So Scotland has over 780 islands. It's a small country, but they have so many small islands around their land there. And people were living there, but the Vikings came and, killed most of them. So eventually, the English people were trying to attack Scotland, but the Vikings joined the Picts and the Irish, the Gaels, and they attacked England. So three of the families in Scotland joined together. They made their team, and they attacked the English. So the Vikings saved us a little. So England had their king, and after the Vikings disappeared and the Irish became part of Scotland, in Scotland, so after that the English and Scottish had a king. Now Scotland was a real country. It was called Alba. So they had their own king, England had their own king. But England always attacked Scotland. Always. Many, many times. But they couldn't defeat Scotland. Later, England still attacked Scotland. Again and again and again. And unfortunately, Scotland became weaker and weaker. So in 1707, they became the UK. They became part of the UK. So it's still a different country, but it joined with England to make the UK. So now we have a lot of culture from Ireland in Scotland. We have culture from Ireland. We have culture from Norway and the Vikings who came, especially in these islands, because those are the first places the Vikings came to. And we have traditional Scottish culture from the people who lived in Scotland originally. So there are many different cultures in Scotland. What happens there? Okay. So many people living in the north, they were very traditional people, and they didn't like we joined the UK. They weren't happy. So they tried to kill the King of England. They didn't succeed. They didn't kill the king. And the king got very angry, and he said that it's illegal. You mustn't have clans. You mustn't have your own group. Scottish people can't have weapons. Scottish people can't wear their kilt. It's illegal. And of course, people living on this land. So this land was owned by very rich people, and he said, you can't stay. You can't live on this land. So in 1746, many Scottish people left Scotland. So they went to America or Canada or Australia. Eventually. About 10% of the population in Scotland left. Okay, let's take a break. So now I want to show you a video about Scotland. I hope it works. This is Scotland now, not 2,000 years ago. So actually this party was from the north where the Vikings came, so it was to do with fire. It was traditionally a Viking culture. Delicious. Sorry about the music. Terrible. So, two things you might notice is there's a lot of rocks. There's a lot of stone and rock. The second thing is maybe that there's a lot of water. And it's earlier we spoke about the ice that came in the Ice Age, the glacier. So, because of the rivers of ice, it really shaped Scotland's land. So, it would run, the big river of ice would run through the land and make huge valleys, and along the way it picks up big pieces of rock from the mountains and it carries it, and when the glacier melts there are many bits of rock. We call it scree. So there are many bits of rock. So sometimes you can go for a hike in Scotland and you can just find one big stone in the land because of glaciers. So it really shapes Scotland's countryside. And of course, when the ice melts, it forms these lakes. But in Scotland, we don't call them lakes. We call it loch. Loch. L-O-C-H. Loch. Because Scottish language is a little different from English language, just a little. So if there's a lake in Scotland, we call it loch. So Nesco, Loch Ness. It's not Lake Ness, it's Loch Ness. Loch Ness. So Scotland has a lot of lakes, a lot of lochs. Oh God, it has a lot of lochs. I had to check, but it has over 30,000 freshwater lochs.
Wow.
So it's the same size as Hokkaido, but it has 30,000 freshwater lochs. So many. Some of them are over 3 kilometers deep. Loch Ness, Nesco, has the more water in one loch here. It has more water in there than all the lakes in England, Ireland and Wales together. So that one loch has more water than the rest of the UK. So Scotland has a lot of fresh water, which is great. There's Loch Ness, Ness Monster, Nessie. I remember watching this TV show when I was a child. It was really bad. So a lot of water means it's good for the nature, but it's also great for wildlife. That's a Scottish cow. It's just a cow. Special type of cow. Highland cow. It's from the north of Scotland. They're very cute. But fresh water is very good for Scotch. So we need fresh water full of minerals to make good Scotch. So now in Scotland there are over 110 Scotch distilleries where they make Scotch, where they make whiskey. And they're all around the country. Different areas have different taste because of the water and also because of the air. So when we... so that's how to make the Scotch. Yeah, huge. And they usually, to make Scotch, you must leave it in a barrel. You must leave it for at least 6 years to be called Scotch. Maybe 3 years. No, maybe they changed it. But over time, the alcohol evaporates. It disappears in the air. So usually we leave it for about 10 or 12 years. And by that time, about 33% of the alcohol has disappeared. So they lose a lot of money. We call it the angel's share, because it goes to heaven. It disappears to heaven.
Angels, yeah.
So we give that to the angels. So that's a problem, but it also helps the flavour, because the alcohol disappears, but the air comes in. So if the whiskey is made on an island, the salt water air comes in, so you can taste the salt on the whiskey. If it's made near a forest, you can taste the sweetness. So it's very good. So it's very good. So if it's made the forest air comes in, so you can taste the flavour of the air. So the area really really decides the flavour. It's interesting. And the best time to drink whiskey is January 25th. January 25th is Burns Night. We call it Burns Night. This man is called Robert Burns. And this is my hometown actually, in Dumfries. The statue of Robert Burns. So he was a writer. He wrote stories and poems. And he wrote a song. You can hear it every day in Japan. His music. Every day now in Japan. When the shop closes, you can hear his music. Should old acquaintance be forgot and never brought to mind? So he actually rewrote that song. It was a folk song and he changed it and made it famous. So, from Scotland. So on January 25th, we always have a party and we eat Scottish traditional food. So this is Scottish traditional food. We call it haggis. Not haggis, but haggis. Haggis. So it's very delicious. This is it doesn't look delicious. This was Robert Burns' favourite food. So haggis, neeps, tatties. It's Scottish. In English, haggis, turnips. Turnip? How do you say that? Is that cabble? No. How do you say
Turnip, like a white
vegetable? Yeah.
turnip.
I don't know how to say in Japanese.
No.
Turnip. Maybe.
Radish?
Like radish, but sweet. It's a lot.
Yeah.
It's very sweet. And potato. So in Scotland we say tatties. Tatty is potato. Neep is turnip, and of course haggis is haggis. So Scotland's famous for its meat. The beef is very delicious, and so are the vegetables. But it's especially famous for fish and seafood. So there's a lot of very delicious fish and seafood in Scotland, but I don't like fish, so it's a waste. It's a waste for me.
How about the river fish? You don't like?
Yeah, I don't like fish at all. Actually, since I came to Japan, I've tried hard to like fish, so gradually I'm changing. And of course, some very good Scottish cheese, especially cheddar. Good Scottish cheddar cheese. So I really miss cheese. I can't find it in Japan. So we have a party. So we have the Robert Burns food. So the haggis, turnip, and potato. Oh, sorry. That's not true. This isn't true. So actually, haggis is made from sheep's lungs. Sheep's lungs. So it's not. It doesn't sound delicious, but they take the lungs and stuff from a sheep, and they cut it up and add some spice and herbs, and then tradition is this is the stomach of a sheep. So you put it inside the stomach, like a sausage. Nowadays, they don't use stomach of sheep. They changed the recipe. Yeah, so first we have the meal, and of course we drink scotch, of course.
How about beer?
Beer is... We usually drink beer. Scotland's beer isn't so good. There are some small local breweries. Those are really good, but especially the ale. Rather than beer, the ale is much better. But the main Scottish beer is really bad. Really bad. Tennant's beer.
Whiskey is beer.
Whiskey's much better. But actually, so I was talking about the tax.
Tax.
In Scotland, it's really high for whiskey, only for whiskey, because in 1751, when England gained control of 1747, sorry, when they made the laws about Scotland, they noticed Scotland has a lot of money from Scotch, so they decided to increase the tax only for Scotch, not for other alcohol, just for Scotch. So it affected Scottish people, but it didn't affect England and Ireland and Wales. So even now, if you buy, well, last year, if you bought a bottle of Scotch in the UK, 81% is tax. So if you buy, if you spend £100 on a bottle of Scotch, £81 goes to tax to the government. Too much. But if I buy Scotch in Japan, it's much cheaper. So I can buy good Scotch here.
You can drink a lot of Scotch.
I drink too much. So we have our meal, we have our Scotch, and we often read some poems written by Robert Burns. And then later we dance. It's a Scottish dance party. We call it Ceilidh. It's a Scottish word, Ceilidh. The spelling is really difficult. Ceilidh. But we call it Ceilidh. I'll show you a little video. So if you drink whiskey, this is really fun.
Old people?
All people, everyone can dance. So it's very, very, actually it's really, really fun. It doesn't look fun, but it's really fun. So before the song, before the music, the Ceilidh band will give you a very quick lesson about how to dance. So if you don't know how to dance, it's no problem. And the dance style is very repetitive. It's the same dance over and over and over again. So if you can't learn the first time, it's no problem, because at the end of the song you have done it about 8 times. So it's really fun. If you go to Scotland, you should try Ceilidh dancing. It's really good fun. But you saw they were wearing their skirts. Actually, it's the Scottish national dress. I have mine today. I was wearing it in Daito today. So, you wear it like this. And actually there are many kinds of... This is called a kilt. And there are many kinds of kilt. So, this is very relaxed because the shirt, it's different. This is very formal. So it's like the suits style. So if we have a wedding, when we get married, we'll wear this kind of style. But just for a Ceilidh, some dance, we'll have this shirt, so it's really relaxed and there's no tie, it's just comfortable and open. So yeah, I usually wear this for Ceilidh dancing and so on. But where are we? There aren't any pockets. There are no pockets. So So that's why we use this round our waist. It's like a bag. So it's usually made of cow leather. And inside you can keep your whiskey. So when the Scottish were fighting with England, the Scottish warriors wore this kilt. More traditional, of course. And inside, actually, they carried... So sometimes they'd have some gunpowder if they use guns, so they can change their gun and shoot again. But also, they needed whiskey, because, you know, if they're cold, they can drink whiskey. And also, if they get some injury, they can use it to disinfect their wounds. But they usually finished it before they could disinfect it.
You can wear any kinds of kilt or any color?
Yep, there's no rules at all, but tradition is people usually have their own